Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to act as your analytical survival guide today as we break down a seriously suspenseful piece of source material, the completely terrifying corrupted footage recovered from Pine Hollow Forest. We're diving into exactly how this footage constructs an absolute masterclass in suspense using just the visual and audio evidence left behind. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's jump right in with the single most important rule established by this whole thing. This quote right here really sets the ultimate stakes for the horrifying descent we're about to witness. I mean, it tells us right out of the gate that what we're looking at isn't just a recording, it's a trap. And as we break down these mechanics, you're going to see exactly why that final video file is so incredibly dangerous. Section 1. The discovery of Camera 7, October 2023 in Pine Hollow Forest, Oregon. So, documentary filmmaker Ethan Brooks disappeared, and he left behind only this footage. It starts out at 5:42 p.m. in total boring normalcy, but notice how the forest isolates its victim through this brilliant dramatic irony. In Ethan's reality, he's just laughing into the lens, completely dismissing all the local myths. But through the camera's view, a tall figure just briefly appears right between the trees behind him. Ethan completely misses it. And then, seconds later, the figure is just gone. It perfectly establishes our baseline of suspense, you know? The camera sees what the victim can't. Then, as night falls, the auditory anomalies start kicking in. The source makes it clear that these are not animal sounds, and they definitely aren't normal human voices either. I just want you to imagine the sheer terror of standing in pitch-black woods and suddenly hearing your own name whispered from literally every direction. He spins around and nobody's there. The environment itself is actually starting to close in on him, weaponizing his own identity to build up the dread. Section 2. The cabin in the woods at exactly 8:17 p.m. Notice how the whole environment shifts here. Ethan stumbles upon this abandoned wooden cabin, front door just wide open. Inside, absolutely everything is covered in thick dust, except for one single chair that looks like it was just used. But the real kicker is this chilling warning carved straight into the cabin wall. Don't answer your own voice. It's this crucial piece of evidence that Ethan unfortunately just brushes off with a nervous little laugh. He doesn't even realize the rules of the forest have literally been written on the walls for him. And then the psychological terror just spikes instantly. Someone inside the cabin speaks, "Ethan, come downstairs." But the voice, it's Ethan's own voice. He is hearing the exact thing that carving just warned him about, spoken impossibly by himself, inviting him down into a pitch-dark basement. The suspense here is completely built on anticipating what's going to happen when you break the rules of a space you just don't understand. All right, Section 3. Breaking the rules of reality, the basement. Now this is where the natural laws of the forest completely shatter. Ethan slowly opens the basement door into the dark, and his flashlight reveals physical evidence that just shouldn't exist. Muddy footprints. But get this, they're upside down. The toes are pointing toward him, orienting in a way that suggests this supernatural threat didn't just walk in, but actually emerged from beneath him, walking up from underground. It's a total spatial impossibility. It signals to us that Ethan is completely defenseless against whatever is down there. Suddenly, his primary survival tool, his only source of light, and his only way to document this is totally crippled. Without any warning, the camera battery inexplicably plummets from 82% straight down to 1% in an instant. This abrupt tech failure forces a massive spike in tension. Time is quite literally running out. And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying discrepancy of camera number 7. The screen flickers. Ethan sees a smooth-skinned, pale woman with long black hair and no face standing right behind him. He whips around instantly. But in real life, the room is completely empty. There's nothing there. But when he looks back at the flickering camera screen, she is closer. The camera is basically acting as a window into a parallel, hostile reality. The threat is only visible on the screen, making the very device we are watching the footage through an actual tool of psychological torture. Section 4. The endless loop and GPS failure. Panicking, Ethan runs outside. But of course, the forest isn't done with him. When you trace the timeline of events, you can see how rapidly his situation just completely deteriorates. He finds his GPS is totally dead. Every single path through the woods leads him right back to that same exact cabin, over and over again. So from casual daylight filming at 5:42 p.m. to the cabin at 8:17 p.m., we are now pushing toward absolute midnight horror. The environment has trapped him in a geographical loop, setting the stage for the kind of deep psychological exhaustion that really defines great suspense. By 11:53 p.m., the pacing of our explainer really mirrors Ethan's breathless reality. He begins to hear footsteps, and the source outlines terrifyingly specific rules for them. They're slow. They're heavy. Whenever Ethan runs, they stop. Whenever he stops, they start again. But they are closer every single time. It is essentially a sadistic game of red light, green light in the pitch dark, meant to just completely wear down his sanity. The technological manipulation continues when his phone suddenly rings. Now, on one hand, the network status clearly shows no signal, no network whatsoever, yet someone is calling. And the caller ID? It literally says Ethan Brooks. His dead phone is ringing from his own phone number. The impossible is now actively reaching out to communicate with him.
So he actually answers the phone. And this terrified voice on the other end whispers a desperate warning. Don't let it see your face. And then the call just cuts off entirely. We're never told who is speaking, but given the whole vibe of this forest, we can safely assume the worst. It's just another rule, delivered right in the nick of time to heighten that creeping paranoia.
At 12:08 a.m., the suspense reaches this crazy visual crescendo. Ethan accidentally points the camera toward a nearby hill, and for exactly one single frame, the camera captures more than 50 silent people standing between the trees. None of them are moving. All of them are staring directly at him. And in the very next frame, they vanish. It's just a masterful use of subliminal horror in the source text, really showing us the sheer scale of whatever entity is actually hunting him.
Section 5. The Final Encounter on the Road. Breathing heavily, Ethan finally pushes through the trees and experiences this massive wave of false hope when a police car pulls up. The officer rolls down the window and says, "You look lost." Relieved, Ethan goes to open the passenger door. But if you look closely at this incredibly subtle visual cue in the side mirror, the smiling officer inviting him inside has absolutely no reflection. The rescue is a total illusion. That officer is not human.
The officer slowly smiles and delivers this horrific realization: you were never supposed to leave. Just as those words are spoken, the camera falls to the ground, abandoning Ethan to his unknown fate. The visual part of the footage ends right here, but the suspense of the recording, yeah, it is definitely not over.
Section 6. The Next Visitor and the Aftermath.
So the police never actually found Ethan Brooks, but the recording didn't stop when the camera hit the dirt. The remaining audio paints this incredibly gruesome picture of his final moments. The source breaks down the end of the recording into 3 very distinct steps. First, total pitch-black darkness on the screen. Second, the sound of heady breathing. And third, complete silence for exactly 1 minute. By stripping away all the visual information, the footage forces you to just imagine the unseen horror in that darkness and that agonizing silence. It is literally suspense distilled to its purest form.
After that 1 minute of silence, an unidentified voice whispers directly into the microphone. It's not Ethan, and it's not the officer. It just says, "We are ready for the next visitor." This single line completely reframes our entire explainer. The footage ends, but the source material reveals this horrifying cycle. Every single year, someone discovers another abandoned camera in Pine Hollow Forest. Each one contains footage of a different missing person, and each recording ends the exact same way. The cameras themselves are the bait.
We started this explainer with a warning, and we're ending it with a question. The source material meticulously outlined how Pine Hollow Forest uses dramatic irony, psychological manipulation, and impossible geometry to break down its victims. Now, knowing the inescapable cyclical trap of these woods, is your curiosity actually worth your life? Because if you ever find a camera in Pine Hollow Forest, will you play the recording? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the anatomy of suspense, and hey, stay curious out there.